Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy, presented by Noble Ice Vineyards. My name is Matt Baker, here for another midweek edition where we look at city news and where I usually give an MLS roundup, but because it's not an ordinary week, we have a midweek matchup. We're going to do a preview of the LAFC match that builds on what we did on Flyover Fallout with Santiago Beltran this past week. If you listened to that recent Fallout covering the 3-1 win over Chicago, you heard some of those high-level details on LAFC. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into those stats, the key matchups, and overall keys to the game. But first, there was a press conference and training open to the media on Monday. We're going to get into the big story on everyone's mind, Edu Löwen. Bradley Carnell, post-game against Chicago, indicated that Edu Löwen would be available to make an announcement this week, and the rumor mills have gone into a bit of an overdrive online. Löwen was not available on Monday to talk to us, but he will be available, we understand, on Thursday. From Monday, Bradley Carnell's quote on Edu Löwen was that he's training with us. He's lost a bit of fitness. He's working his way back. He's a gem of a human being to be around. He makes us stronger with his presence and his footballing qualities. He's going to be a ways for him to get back. I think that's obvious, but we'll see how he progresses this week to see if he plays a role on Wednesday or if he plays a role on Saturday. Carnell specified, I'm confident of one or the other. Huge news for St. Louis, as there's been concern about Löwen and what his future holds in what he's dealing with his personal issues. But it's good to know that Bradley Carnell sees Löwen as being available either Wednesday or Saturday, and we hope to hear from him later this week. Looking at LAFC, and it's almost a shame that we don't get to go into a big MLS preview or MLS roundup rather, because we understand that the MLS overall set a record this past week for the most goals scored in a single MLS match week. Pretty exciting to look at goals all around, including St. Louis's 3-1 win. But another team that scored a lot of goals was LAFC. Coming into this match, just to recap that high-level overview, LAFC sits in 5th place in the MLS West, 5-4-3 record with 18 points. St. Louis is 3-1-7 in 9th place in the MLS Western Conference with 16 points. Just 2 points separate these teams. So in addition to what we talked about with some of the high-level stats and key players last week, what are some of the key notes on LAFC? Well, LAFC has extremely strong wing play in their attack with Denny Bouanga on the left and Christian Oliveros on the right. A key battle I have is, in fact, Denny Bouanga against Thomas Totland on St. Louis's right side. I asked Thomas Totland about Denny Bouanga on Monday, and Totland said, with this being my first year, every game is my first game versus many teams. That's also a good thing because I can play a little more on my instinct, and that's what I'll try to do on Wednesday. Thomas Totland went on to say, you need to look at their strengths and you need to play on their weaknesses. He's super fast, that I know, and that's something I need to think about during the game. Maybe his defensive work rate might be not that good. Quality all over the field is a concern for LAFC in St. Louis's sense, because they do have strong quality and they have a consistent starting 11. But just like the question with St. Louis, will they rotate? LAFC has a very strong starting 11 that they run out fairly regularly, which looks at Denny Bouanga, it sees Mateus Bogus, and it sees Christian Oliveros up front. In the midfield, they have a very strong midfield that comprises their 4-3-3 with Edward Atuesta, Ilie Sanchez, and Timothy Tillman. We're going to get into Ilie Sanchez in just a minute. But this midfield and their attack has a lot of good qualities. They have some similar styles of play to St. Louis and how direct they are, but quality-wise, the ball handling skills are there. There's a huge question going into Wednesday's match, though, of their number 6 in the field and on his jersey, Ilie Sanchez. He left the game at the 80-minute mark against Vancouver this past week with an apparent knee or leg injury, and he seemed extremely upset after a hard leg-to-leg contact with Vancouver. There's questions about what his future might hold in the near term and whether he'll be available this week against St. Louis. On the St. Louis side, the team has settled into a groove in both their chance creation and strong defense. That couples with their 4th game in a row where they ran the same starting 11. Bradley Carnell said on Monday, we take what the game needs, knowing we've got guys like Yaro, Blom, Löwen, and Nilsson out, and eventually the roster gets thinner and thinner. The guys start playing more frequently, there's more cohesion, and I would say more optimism of the movement, and that's been apparent in the past couple of games. I don't plan, predict, or forecast that. I don't see it as a strength or weakness. It's just what the moment needs. So Bradley Carnell, he's always had the next man up philosophy, and looking at how he can build on a consistent starting 11, along with the fact that you can plug and play anybody. He had some interesting comments when it came to rotation, because this midweek match offers an ability to rotate if he needs to. But when you've built on what you've had the past few games and you've been successful at finishing, do you want to do that? Because St. Louis is looking to finish or continue their finishing from the last game instead of hearkening back to previous games before that. Houston, Austin FC, FC Dallas, where they struggled to finish, even though their chance creation was pretty effective. It's the quality over the quantity. Bradley Carnell said regarding rotation, what he wants to see from his team, he said 3 points next game. That's the mentality when it comes to prioritizing a game with rotation. They're looking at this next match ahead. So Bradley Carnell said regarding the minutes that guys like Anthony Marcanic, Chris Durkin, Thomas Totland have put in so far, nearing 900 so far already this season. He said, for sure, we were thinking early on Champions Cup and we go out early. Now there's no Open Cup and we're not challenged on rotation as much. And now there's this midweek match, so we don't see it as big of a problem. We manage volume coming in and out of games, and either it's a top up or a taper down in terms of loads. Carnell said that their availability rate in terms of trainings are really high. They're not having players sit out because they have injuries or knocks that they pick up in games or in midweek trainings. And he went on to say, we're not really worried about overloading these guys. Bradley Carnell left it on Monday saying, we've managed it really well, so I don't think we'll have to rotate the lineup much. Good news for St. Louis City fans as they've seen some pretty exciting things from this 11. And overall, injury-wise, you're getting Jabulu blown back. Joachim Nilsson could start at any day now. You're having Josh Yarrow, who integrated himself a little bit further into training on Monday. And of course, Edu Löwen, we'll find out if he's able to go Wednesday. And if not, look for him on Saturday. The entire starting 11 for LAFC can be dangerous from their midfield up. A lot of the key stats really point to effective ball control by their midfield. It leads to their goal scoring capability by guys like Denny Bwanga, who leads their team with 6 goals compared to Klaus leading St. Louis with 5 goals. Assist-wise, it's also Denny Bwanga with 5 assists on the season. And that's similar to Klaus, who's tied for the team lead in assists for St. Louis with 2, tied with Celio Pompeu and Rasmus Alm. You can see that the entirety of the attacking midfield into their strikers are getting involved in where the chance creation and the ball movement is coming from. Where is the ball coming from, though, in those shot creations in general? Key passes for LAFC are led by Mateus Bogus, their central attacker, with 25 key passes, those passes that lead directly to a shot. Denny Bwanga is second with 21, and Timothy Tillman, their right midfielder, is third, tied with Denny Bwanga with 21. On the St. Louis side, key passes, you've got Celio Pompeu, Joao Klaus, and Indiana Vasilov leading the team with 21, 18, and 17 respectively. And then completed passes are an interesting stat to look at because it highlights just how key the midfield is for LAFC. They have players with over 400 completed passes so far this season, and you're looking at their left side center mid, Edward Atuesta, with 500 completed passes. Ilie Sanchez, their central defender, or the central midfielder, number 6, with 439. Ryan Hollingshead, their defender, with 437. And then their other central midfielder, Timothy Tillman, on the right side with 401. 3 of their top 4 players in completed passes are in their midfield. That's where the ball progresses. They might build out of the back, but they're building it to their central midfield who make the ball move, whether it's carrying it or progressing it up with short passes. On the St. Louis side, it's Anthony Marcanic, Thomas Totland, Tim Parker as the 3 players with over 300. It highlights a symmetrical approach that St. Louis has utilized this season that we've talked about plenty of times between Anthony Marcanic and Thomas Totland. Looking at the quality and how these teams possess the ball and how their styles match up, both teams are averaging less than 50% possession overall on the season, but in the past few games, it's been pretty different. LAFC is half and half on over or under 50% of possession, but their last 5 matches have all been 53% possession or higher. On the St. Louis side, 8 of their 11 matches have been below 50% possession, including their last 4, where they've gone unbeaten, 2 wins and 2 draws. Looking at the analysis under the hood, St. Louis is still the lowest sequence time in MLS, the fewest passes per sequence, and the quickest direct speed in MLS. They do not pass the ball consistently across the field. They get the ball as high as possible, as quick as possible. LAFC, the 13th quickest team in sequence, the middle of the pack. 9th fewest passes per sequence, but the 2nd quickest in terms of direct speed up the field. So what does this look like? Well, St. Louis is obvious in their aerial and direct threat, but LAFC has no problem in the volume of possession, and they often start building out of the back, quickly getting it to their midfielders who lead the league, like I said, and they also lead the league in progressive carries. They're 9th in the amount of 10-plus passing sequences in the league and have 85 more 10-plus passing sequences than St. Louis. This is a team unafraid to pass the ball, whether it's short, medium, or long, and unafraid to move the ball as quickly as possible, but they do have this volume possession to their game. They're consistent in how much they like to control the ball and play with the ball at their feet. Ppda is another fun stat we love here at Flyover Footy. Passes per defensive action, the number of passes that a team allows before you engage on the ball. It's a key battle because LAFC is 4th in the league and St. Louis is 5th in Ppda, indicating both teams love to have that high press or at least engage the ball quickly as the opposition begins their possession. St. Louis had the edge in turnovers forced high, 132 to 111, despite LAFC having played an extra game. St. Louis also has 29 shots and 5 goals that result from their high turnovers. LAFC only has 16 shots, ending in those high turnovers with 1 goal. So LAFC is not as effective when they turn the ball and they force turnovers high up on the field as St. Louis is. And that could be a huge benefit for St. Louis, as we saw in the Chicago match where they were very clinically effective in their high press. My stat of the night looking into this LAFC match is ball movement and key passing per 90 because LAFC has played 1 extra game. This indicates how LAFC likes to progress the ball. We look at carries. Progressive carries, carrying the ball 10 yards or more vertically. LAFC leads the league with about 22.1 per game. St. Louis is in the bottom 8 of progressive carries with only 14.3 per game. Carries into the penalty box. How does the ball arrive into the final third? LAFC leads the league and carries into the penalty box with 7 per game. Their attacking ball handlers will not be afraid to take possession of that ball outside the box and work to create space for themselves, moving it into the box. St. Louis, while LAFC leads the league, St. Louis is 6th with 5.18 per game. You have players like Alm, Salio, and Klaus who take possession of the ball outside of the box and do that exact same thing. LAFC just does it more. Key passes that lead directly into a shot. St. Louis leads the league in key passes per 90 with 12.4, and LAFC is right there in second with 12.3. This is going to be a high-octane match. Both of these teams love to get the ball into the final third. Their zones of control show that they love to control the ball up until midfield, and then on their wings is where they typically take possession in the final third. The battles are going to be high and wide for both teams. So fullbacks, Chris Durkin for St. Louis, Ilie Sanchez for LAFC are going to be huge in how they can mitigate these wide areas that both teams are going to look to take the ball. So what are my keys to the game? Effective presses for St. Louis, just like we saw at Chicago. If St. Louis can disrupt how LAFC builds into their midfield, they're going to have a good time. Don't get caught in behind one of the defensive wing areas and have your defenders stretched or pulled out of position, creating space for LAFC. Think of those moments where you have a fullback who kind of works their way centrally on defense, especially in transition. Thomas Totland was caught in one of these instances against Chicago, and Anthony Marcanic earlier on in the season especially was very deficient in this area where he would get beat wide, and not necessarily a fault of his own, but he would either get beat wide to the point where he was folding in centrally, and we were trying to chase some of the other opposition players into the box, leaving wide areas open for service to be delivered. LAFC will take advantage of that if we give it to them. And then in the channels, moving into those attacking third areas, the channels must be clogged. Chris Durkin is going to need to remain focused in his defensive responsibilities. I call this specifically out because at the post game against Chicago, Chris Durkin mentioned very directly that he was told by Carnell and staff that he had to be reined in a little bit in how much he was pushing up. So look for Durkin to be either trailing back a little bit more and helping these fullbacks in spaces, or Tomas Ostrak is going to have to be much more clinical in covering for Durkin in those defensive responsibilities. It leaves a potentiality for the midfield to be stretched in how Tomas Ostrak and Chris Durkin operate, but not pressing too high, allowing your defenders to really be able to have coverage against LAFC. That's going to be important. And the last thing is trust your defense. St. Louis can respect the capabilities of LAFC while still imposing their own style. So I'm not talking about dropping back into a low block or maybe even a mid block by any means. St. Louis can progress quickly, just like LAFC, and use wings to control the pace and flow. St. Louis needs to allow Klaus to be a target, while Indy and those under Klaus continue to progress the ball into those final third areas. Looking at how they did last week against Chicago is a great blueprint against a team that attempts a press. You just need to be more effective than them and allowing your defenders to do what they do and trust that they're going to do their jobs, because we've seen a growth throughout this season with our fullbacks, especially Thomas Totland and Anthony Marcanic, in how they're able to defend intelligently. They know when to push and they know when to fall back a little bit more. We have not been beaten as badly as we have earlier in the season in our wide defensive wings with Totland and Marcanic. So from LAFC, what are they going to throw at us in addition to their style? A 4-3-3, almost assuredly. They have fast movements with quick passes, efficiently getting the ball high into their wings. Like I said, Denny Bwanga, he can play make, he can create space for others just as well as he can finish for himself. He's going to be so important to watch, but the problem St. Louis would have is 2v1ing Denny Bwanga, because if they fold and commit too much on Bwanga, he's going to do what he did against Vancouver, which is have 3 assists. He's just going to create space for guys like Mateus Bogus and for Christian Oliveira, who has been playing extremely well on their right wing side. Trust the defense, especially Ilie Sanchez. That's what LAFC is going to be doing. If Ilie Sanchez is out, then the defense of LAFC changes. If he's out with an injury, it's going to be the game changer to watch for, dictating the pace that St. Louis could hope for in the midfield. So what's my predicted starting 11? That's a lot of info, but let's jump right into it because this is a fast-paced show and we want to get you in and out of here very quickly. Same starting 11 as we had before. Roman Berkey, Anthony Marcanic, Joachim Nilsson or Kyle Hebert. I could go either way. We're going to that'll be a game time decision or game day decision for Flyover Footy. Tim Parker, Thomas Tollin, Chris Durkin, Tomas Ostrak, Indy, or Celio Pompeu, Indiana Vasilev, Rasmus Alman, Klaus. It's been working so far. Bradley Carnell alluded very directly to not needing to or really wanting to rotate. He might surprise us, but all indications are that he's going to roll with as much of the same lineup as allows based on recovery and regen from the previous game. So if one of these players doesn't go, they probably didn't meet a mark from the training staff. That's all we have for you on this show. Hope you enjoyed this fast-paced look at LAFC. We wanted to get a little more depth into it on top of our Flyover Fallout. I'm Matt Baker. Thank you so much for joining us on Flyover Footy. Follow us on our socials if you haven't. Subscribe to our YouTube podcasts. Go City. We hope to see another win midweek and building on that positive, massively positive result we had against Chicago. If I had to take a guess on a predicted scoreline right now, it may change for game day, but right now I'm feeling 2-1 St. Louis City. Go City. Enjoy match day against LAFC.